This podcast is a proud member of Pod Nation Media Network.
Flicker of reels, the shadows crawl. Curtains rise, a ghostly sprawl. The frames are whispers, the stories call. The drifters hum in a hollow tune. Moonlight cuts through velvet gloom. Is it a dream or a real too soon? Step into the screen where the dark turns keen. Journey with the cinephile, unseen, unseen. The veils twist and turn as the silent light burns. A world unknown where the shadows yearn.
Hello and welcome, listeners, to Journey with a Cinephile, a horror movie podcast, where we take a deep dive into the world of horror cinema, from the eerie classics to the latest spine-chilling releases. Join me as I explore the history, themes, and artistry of horror one film at a time. Whether you're a seasoned horror fan or just stepping into the shadows, this journey is for you. So dim the lights, embrace the fear, and let's talk horror. And let's do that on episode 330. I'm your tour guide of David Garrett Jr., recording out of Columbus, Ohio. So as we move here into March, I'm going to start celebrating my Centennial Club, start inducting more members into that. So this is going to be number 22 of doing these ones. And my first featured review is going to be one that was hitting festivals last year, it sounds like. And it's going to be Redux, or Redo. I'm not really necessarily sure how you pronounce it. I probably should have looked that up. But this is getting its wide release here in 2026. And I'm pairing this up with a 100-year-ago film of A Page of Madness. This comes from Japan. So this double feature focuses on two films that explore the psychological trauma inflicted upon parents by an event involving their children. So I also have some mini reviews here for you. My scouring through the sixes rewatch is going to be God Told Me To. This is a Larry Cohen film. I have a couple of screeners here of NFT Cursed Images and Dark Distortion. And then I'm also going to be doing a documentary here, Physical Media Lives. I think this also goes by like Movie Hoarder, something along that line. I'm also going to cover then 4 more episodes of the final season of the original run of the Twilight Zone. I think that's season 5. And then I have a book that I got to receive a critic's copy of Beyond Zombie Politics, The Art of George A. Romero's Cinema. So I don't think there's anything else I need to do here for this intro outside of saying thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy coming on this journey with me.
Hello, this is Rue and Willow with the Oh, Fuck Yeah, with Rue and Willow podcast. I'm excited you're here again. Always, I'm excited you're here. When I come to my podcast, we talk about sex. We talk about sexuality. We talk about better sex, erotica, all kinds of yummy stuff related to sex and sexuality. Get entertained, improve your intimacy, and get advice to harness your empowerment. You have the tools right in you. Just get the advice. Listen to my interviews on Fridays with experts. Doctors, professors, personalities, people who are free and open and have great things to say. And on Tuesdays, I have erotic fiction. Find me on all the podcast apps. Come today. Don't forget to come today. Enjoy your body. Give yourself that amazing experience of orgasm where you can imagine how wonderful that will feel. All of those amazing hormones flooding your body, making you feel exhilarated. Amazing, incredible, like never before. Reach for it, take it, baby. Make yourself come today. You have an amazing day. Love ya. Oh, fuck yeah. Bye-bye.
Are you Rise Coffee?
And for my first mini review here is going to be God Told Me To. This is from 1976, written and directed by Larry Cohen. Stars Tony LoBianco, Deborah Raffin, and Sandy Dennis. Also features Richard Lynch. So this is a crime, horror, mystery, sci-fi thriller film from the United States, currently sitting on a 6.3 on IMDb, and a 3.5 on Letterboxd, or a synopsis being: a detective investigates a series of murders committed by random New Yorkers who claim that God told them to. So this is a film that I got turned on to thanks to podcasts. I decided to check this one out for a horror movie challenge that I was doing, where I needed to watch something for our Larry Cohen that he directed for a October movie challenge by Hooptober. So the concept of this one intrigued me, so I was excited to check it out for that. I've also given it a rewatch now as part of my scouring through the sixes. So I'm going to go ahead and start then would be that this isn't the most complex story. You don't necessarily need it to be. It's more of an experience at times. It's an interesting idea. We have Peter, who is portrayed by Lo Bianco, who is a detective. He is a orphan who is deeply religious. So there's these murders that are happening, and he first sees the one that happens to kind of kick everything off. And let me see if I can figure out. It's done by Harold Gorman, portrayed by Sammy Williams. And what he ends up figuring out here is that he just all of a sudden decided he was going to do this, and he claims that God told him to do it. And so what ends up happening here is that there's some elements of backstory that kind of get factored in here. He's deeply troubled by these murders and needs to solve them. Like I said, he ended up growing up in foster care, so he was there for others, and with his position, growing up in his faith and everything, it shakes him when he's hearing that God told these people to do this. So there's also this figure here of Bernard, who is Bernard Phillips, portrayed by Lynch. Now, he has a small part, but he's very important. There's some odd elements here, but I won't spoil what those are. And what I will say is that Bernard has talked about by many characters before we actually meet him. There's some reverence and fear about him. His powers are far-reaching, which is scary. And then one aspect here is that there's a father who killed his family, and it truly bothered me this time around as a parent with how calm he is about this horrific act. That was a good touch to include here. Now, where I want to go next would be this odd subplot that's involving this drug dealer, pimp type character of Zero, portrayed by George Patterson. Now, I've seen a documentary about Larry Cohen, and I knew that he did blaxploitation films before this. We've seen interaction here between Zero and like a higher ranked police officer. What's interesting is that Zero does something to cover up this crime that he does, and it's a good touch. Now, something else to include here is that Peter leaks information to a newspaper writer who is an anti-religion science writer with a unique views on God. So using him to disseminate certain information leads to intriguing consequences. The murders from diverse background, and that would be the murderers, are from diverse backgrounds, initially lacks a clear connection. The layered story reveals truths about God, Bernard, religion, and Peter's past. So I think that all kind of works well for what they needed there. So other than those key elements, there's some thin line here between like religious fervor and psychosis, explored through the duality of Bernard's wants and Peter's devout Catholicism, which questions faith and the truth of religion. The subtext also delves into a scientific explanation of religion, repressed sexuality, identity, challenging the nuclear family and masculinity, the societal breakdown leading to chaos and urban alienation. So that should be enough for the story. Let's shift over to the acting performances, which is also solid. Bianco is a believable lead. His drive to solve this mystery and self-discovery work well. Raffin's attractiveness, and she is Casey Forster, who is Peter's girlfriend. I thought her attractiveness and performance were fine. Her character, it does complicate Peter's beliefs and love life. Not necessarily essential to be in this one, though. Lynch's odd role fits well. I would also give credit here to Sandy Dennis, who is Martha. That is Peter's wife, who he's estranged from. There's also Sylvia Sidney, who is Elizabeth Mullen. We have here, I want to make sure that I get Sammy Williams. He was good in his role. Mike Kellen, Mason Adams, and the rest of the cast. They do well for their contribution. All that's left then to be the filmmaking aspects. I appreciate Cohen's cinematography. It captures the authentic feel of New York City. The framing is effective. The effects are minimal, but the blood looks good. Bernard has an interesting, odd light emanating from him. It feels cheesy, but also kind of ethereal. The framework of the flashback scenes work well. There's also some effects here with like a younger version of Elizabeth. It helps to explain the backstory that works, and the soundtrack was appropriate. So in conclusion, this is a compelling and thought-provoking supernatural thriller that uses a sensational premise to explore complex themes of faith, identity, and urban malaise. Cohen delivers an effective film, leveraging the authentic grit of 1970s New York City and drawing a solid performance from a strong cast led by Bianco. While the narrative occasionally feels layered to the point of being disjointed, the central mystery remains captivating, ultimately offering a satisfying, albeit strange, cinematic experience that successfully blends elements of horror, detective, procedural, and social commentary. It's an essential watch for fans of Cohen's distinct style and challenging genre fare. So my rating, actually, from the last time I saw this has come up a bit here, as I now give God Told Me To a 7.5 out of 10. And for my next review here is going to be NFT Cursed Images. This is 2026 film. This is written and directed by Jonas Odenheimer. This stars David Wayman, Mariah Nonamaker, and Darasi Kinagangu. This is a supernatural horror film from the United Kingdom. It's not able to be rated yet on Letterboxd or IMDb, and the synopsis is, a group of crypto-savvy friends have begun experiencing strange occurrences after buying into a cursed NFT collection. A little bit misleading because I actually just kind of get an airdrop to them, but I digress. So this is one I got the chance to see via screener thanks to Justin Cook. I vaguely remember when NFTs were a thing. I'm not shocked, or I'm actually a little bit shocked actually, to figure out that there hasn't really been a horror movie made as of yet about using these. It might have been, I just didn't realize it. I did a little bit of research. I'll come back to it here in a second, but after figuring out this was a horror film that was going to be more like a ghostly, I came into this one blind. It did help to round out my 2026 horror list with independent films, so that's partly why I agreed to check it out. So I'm going to start, though, is saying that I did a search of this, and it sounds like there was one other hit here where Kevin Smith, where you needed to buy a certain number of NFTs to get access to a movie that he made. So it wasn't necessarily centered around it. So this is kind of the first one. So credit here to Odenheimer for bringing the concept to the screen. So we have this group of friends, though, who are all kind of millennials, and they're all into like crypto and doing stuff like that. We have James, portrayed by Wayman. His ex-girlfriend shows up at the party he's at a house here. She is Cass, portrayed by Nanamaker. Now, Dan is kind of the one who is a little bit of the curmudgeon of the group. He's portrayed by Kinagangu. And then we have Sarah, portrayed by Amelia Edwards. And then there's Ness, who is portrayed by Nobus Jr., that's what he's getting credited as here. Then we have Kit, who is portrayed by Cher. Now, they're at his house. His ex-girlfriend is Sarah. Nessa's girlfriend is Julia, portrayed by Clark, and then be Jasmine Clark, and she's the one that brings Cass to the house. So now that they're all set up here, I like this idea that an NFT could be airdropped or have a similar program to your phone, and then you're cursed, which is terrifying. What adds to this tension is that you don't know who sent it. Since there isn't an explanation until later that works, we also see this group split up, making them more vulnerable. Being alone is another good element. I also like that. Even though there is a way that kind of comes up that it's discovered how to defeat them, it isn't necessarily a catch-all. So there are things here that I appreciated. I do need to shift over to a negative, though. Although I do enjoy this idea that if you don't, we don't get a large information dump necessarily. So there isn't truly stakes. Part of my issue is that I didn't connect with any of these characters or truly care what happened to them. I'm also millennial. I do agree with what Dan does. His character intrigued me. He's correct about how the millennial group is the most overeducated and underpaid of any type of group that is any generation and everything like that. I do appreciate him pointing that out. The problem is that the rest of this group comes off as crypto bros. Anything that happens to them, I don't think they deserve it, but it doesn't move my gauge of care. Let's then shift over and talk about the acting performances. I am going to be forgiving since this is an amateur production, but I do think that Townsend and Rich, they effectively set the stage well. Now, she is Najara Townsend portraying Sue, and then her boyfriend is Mark, portrayed by Rich. Now, Wayman and Nanamaker are solid leads, and the depiction of a couple with some lingering awkwardness and how of moving on is a highlight. Kinawangu stands out as the one who's resisting this group's flaws, although his portrayal is a whiny that detracts. The rest of the cast, Edwards, Unifaro, that's actually Nobus's name that is according to Letterboxd. Cher and Clark complete the necessary roles. The women are attractive, so that's something that is kind of a perk here if you're looking for that. I'll also say here this is made well enough. The cinematography and framing are solid. Using the whole frame is something I appreciate. When an entity is lingering behind them, that is something that makes me uncomfortable. I think that the look of the creatures was good. I like seeing this pixelated version, and then what they do to bring that to life works, so credit there. The soundtrack also fits for what was needed. My problem is that is the investment. This doesn't build enough story, and I truly don't care what happens to these characters, causing my interest to wane. So in conclusion, this is technically a sound, independent horror film with a uniquely modern concept, while Odenheimer deserves praise for crafting a horror narrative around the untapped potential of cursed NFTs and for the effective visual design of the entities. This struggles with character connection. The crypto bro archetype makes it difficult to invest fully in their plight, which ultimately hinders the overall tension. Despite the lack of emotional investment, it's a commendable effort in merging contemporary technology anxieties with classic ghost story tropes. While it is worth a look if you are seeking an innovative premise in the horror genre, outside of that, I would avoid this one. So my rating here for NFT Cursed Images, I give this one a 5.5 out of 10. And this should be hitting VOD and everything here. It's March 6th is when this comes out. And another film I got to check out as a screener is going to be Dark Distortion. This is from here in 2026, written and directed by Joseph Herrera. He also appears in this as a side character, but this is starring Jada J, April Hartman, and Ethan Vaughn. This is a crime drama horror film from the United States. It is not being able to be rated on IMDb or on Letterboxd as of yet because it officially has not made its premiere. But the synopsis: a group of adult models turned thieves who face unintended consequences after stealing a camcorder that houses the spirit of a murdered child. So I got a chance to see this thanks to Breaking Glass Pictures. Lauren sent over a screener, so thank you for that. And I figured I'd watch this to kind of help to round out my end of year list with some independent horror films. Outside of knowing that it was in genre and briefly reading the synopsis, I did come into this one as blind as possible. And where I'm going to go ahead and start is that this does some interesting things with the story. It is also odd at times. I can work with the idea that we have grieving parents who would turn to black magic to keep their child around. And I'll go ahead and just say that Victoria is the mother. She's portrayed by Hartman. And then Jeremy, who is her ex-husband, I believe, is portrayed by Joe Walker. And then he has a friend, Bill, who helps him with doing some rituals. He's Marcos Garcia. So that is something that we see fairly regularly. Something else I'll credit is that it plays with expectations with certain characters. As the story approaches its climax, we have some unpredictable deaths of a few characters that occur. I wanted to give credit because it raises the stakes by not protecting characters. So now that it's set up, let's delve a little bit more into the creature we get here. So we have Victoria. She's friends with Travis, who's portrayed by Larry the Fairy. He seems to believe what Victoria is saying, at least to an extent, that her son's soul is trapped in this camcorder. Now, she's convinced that her husband did something to Sammy, that's the son, after he died. The reason I'm bringing this up is that the son had a tumor that killed him. I'm not sure if this was the cause of his violent outburst, but there was a line where Sammy might have killed somebody before he died. He had a volatile personality. That makes this entity, now that Jeremy has transferred his soul, dangerous. So the title is relevant to the concept. What I dislike is the digital distortion, but it is justifiable since Dark Distortion is literally the name of the movie. When the cursed camera is on, Sammy as a shadow can manipulate objects and attack people. Jeremy's grief has made him complicit in their son's chaos. A later unexpected reveal works well with the concept. However, the random use of the camera by characters who don't own it weakens the logic until a late stage explanation. But like I said, it doesn't ruin the movie. It just not necessarily something that I truly loved. So let's explore more with the character that we're following here. There are these online models who live together. They're constantly creating new content. Surprisingly, their income method is a little bit twisted, as the guy who runs everything here is Manny, portrayed by Vaughn, is that he does research on the followers, then his models set up meetups at their house to rob them. This is a convoluted concept that needs refinement, but I'll judge it as we're getting presented here. I will credit here the relevance of the state of content creators and the lengths they'll go for their followers. So that should be enough for the story. So let's go over then to the acting performances. Jay as our lead, she develops well as this newcomer who is going to be taking over our room for another person who is leaving. I think that there's a subplot where she shows how she does have strength to start, but then she develops into this final character or somebody who is battling later into the movie. I thought Hartman effectively portrays a struggling mother, while Walker as her demented counterpart. Vaughn serves as the catalyst for the events. I'll also give credit here to Christina Gonzalez, Lily Lurid, Kiana Williams, Mitchell Maggard. Those are all people that kind of live in this house, and they all kind of fit their roles. And we also have interesting stuff here as we kind of approach the climax, where we have Miles Stoner, who plays Red. He has his own crew, which involves Trish, who is Kristen Nicole, and then Frankie, who's Johnny Ortega. That's his bodyguard. There's a lot of cannon fodder characters here, and I appreciate that. All that's left then to be the filmmaking aspects. Start with the cinematography and framing. These are both fairly well done. They are able to frame things in a way to hide the seams. I do appreciate the shift to Jeremy and the others using this handheld camera. That was a good touch. Moving over to the effects. What they do with the shadow creatures are good. That was limited, blood that we see, but that's fine. Not a fan, like I said, of that digital distortion. I can work with it here to the concept being used, but other than that, the soundtrack fits for what was needed without necessarily standing out. In conclusion, this is a surprisingly effective independent horror film that leverages its central, albeit convoluted concept. A cursed camcorder houses the soul of a violent child. Director Joseph Herrera successfully crafts a narrative that plays with audience expectations, particularly concerning this camera's use could be tighter. The film is visually competent, and the performances, especially from Jay and Hartman, anchor the emotional and horror elements. It serves as a solid entry into the modern independent horror landscape, offering a dark and distorted commentary on exploitation and grief. So my rating here, I kind of wavered what I would do here, but I ended up giving this a 6 out of 10. And this should be hitting VOD here soon. I would keep an eye out for it if this sounds interesting. And there's this documentary here. It has a couple different titles. Is that the one that's on Letterboxd is Movie Hoarders from VHS to DVD and Beyond. And then on IMDb, they have it listed as Physical Media Lives. But this is written and directed by Tony Newton. It features Chris Burgock, Jay Bond, and Nick Charles. So this is a documentary that's from the United Kingdom. It is currently set on a 4.9 on IMDb and a 2.9 on Letterboxd. So the synopsis is, this is going to be a long one. Popular YouTubers, filmmakers, and collectors lift the curtain on their manic media collecting obsession that not only is part of their lives, but the lifeblood of their existence. This new collector's documentary goes where no documentary has gone before as we enter a world of horror hoarders, VHS hoarders, vinyl addicts, and laser disc obsessives. Enter the realm where DVDs and Blu-rays are king and money is no object. When a new release hits, it's a must-buy. Physical media truly lives on in this fascinating documentary with the creators of VHS Lives, VHS Nasty, and Oh, the Horror, brought to you by Newton, the creator and producer of VHS Lives and 60 Seconds to Die series. So I saw this out while working, treating it like a podcast. I've seen Newton, who also appears in this, has done a few of these other documentaries. So kind of what that thing was saying, I've seen VHS Lives and VHS Nasty. These are easy to watch. Just kind of put them on, look down when something interesting pops up. But this is an interesting premise. I'm a movie collector. It was easier to do when I was illegally downloading movies, so I do apologize to the industry in general there. I've seen the error of my ways. And much like my buddy Dave Parker, who appears in this, I started to collect my favorites with some upgraded releases. He's able to do a lot more than I can. My family is getting in the way there, but I love them, and I'm not saying that as a slight. So, regardless of my nefarious ways in the past, I do agree with the basic premise here. Streaming is great until you can't find a specific movie, or it used to be somewhere but the rights are gone. And you never truly own it if you buy it digitally, unless you can get it onto a server where they can't take it away anymore. Now, something I'll say with this is I don't know if it needs to be 2 hours. There are too many people saying the same exact things over and over again. Part of what drew me in is that, I'm aware of who, Michael Fisher is, Emma Wolf, who is Spooky Astronaut on YouTube, and then you also have Mr. Parka. They're all people that are featured here at some point or another, and I know them through the online community. I've even been on Mr. Parka's podcast, so, that's kind of a fun thing to see him here. He was quite a bit younger here, or at least looked quite a bit younger here. I think it might be his long hair that he still had at the time. Not saying you look old, bud. What I will say is this is made well enough. The cinematography and framing are fine. It just doesn't necessarily stand out. I do love seeing all these people's collections. It makes me wish I had more room to grow mine. I know we are considering doing something in the basement here at our house when we get a little bit more money. Even though it does get repetitive, many of their stories, and I'm glad they got to, even though they are similar, I'm glad that they're distinct and able to tell them. So credit to Newton for letting everybody do that and show off their collections. Inclusion, while sometimes feels a little bit overlong due to the repetitive thematic points, it is a compelling watch for anybody interested in the culture of physical media collection. The documentary successfully argues for the enduring value of owning films in an increasingly volatile digital landscape, showcasing the dedication and passion of collectors. Director Newton deserves credit for providing a platform that allows unique personalities to proudly display their thematic treasures and articulate the importance of physical ownership. Ultimately, this film serves as a pleasant, if slightly protracted, affirmation for those that believe that true movie love means holding the artifact in your hands. I also want to give credit here to some other people that I know who they are, would be Sean C. Phillips, John Sussman, and I think those are the ones I also want to make sure that I gave a little bit of credit to here. But that's what I have for this one. And even because this has already been kind of done multiple times by Newton, this one's a little bit even more repetitive for me, but I still give it a 6 out of 10. And I found this on YouTube if you are curious. And I have 4 episodes here of the Twilight Zone. This is going to be season 5, the last run of that original series. And the next one is going to be The Encounter. So this is directed by Robert Butler. It was written by Martin Goldsmith, starring Neville Brand, George Takei, and Takai. I think I'm mispronouncing him, I'm sorry, and Rod Serling. So this is post-World War II Hawaii. 2 men of once opposing races are stuck in an attic full of war trophies, including a samurai sword, waiting to dutifully avenge its slain master. So this one here, quite interesting. I actually didn't even realize that it was George. He was on Star Trek. He's very outspoken on social media, that guy. So we have Fenton, who owns his house. He's portrayed by Brand. And then Takai, who is portraying Arthur Takamori. So we have a guy that's in an attic or a garage. He finds a katana, and it makes him freak out a little bit. He is a former soldier, of course. So that's Mr. Fenton. And then Arthur makes an offer to take care of his yard, and his real name is Taro, but he goes by Arthur. So things get uncomfortable, actually, because Fenton asks him if he would like to stay and help him clean up for a little bit money, like this attic. And like I said, things get uncomfortable here. They end up getting locked in, and it seems to be a little bit supernatural. And then we see at one point that Arthur's had enough. He might be going to kill him. And then we actually learn a little bit more about this sword, this katana. The owner was killed in cold blood, and Arthur points this out. Mr. Fenton kind of looks at him a little bit sideways about it. And then we actually learn a little bit more here about that Arthur actually grew up he grew up near Pearl Harbor. He was a boy during the raid, and there might be a little bit of things that his dad might have done and kind of everything like that. Now, this is definitely playing on the idea how people who look different were kind of targeted during that era, and how this character's family might have been a little bit more guilty. And then same thing with Mr. Fenton, is he kind of feels a little bit guilty. So this is limited to one location. It's hot, tense, and I think there's some really good acting here. I rather enjoyed this one, gave it a 7 out of 10. And then the next episode is going to be Mr. Garrity and the Graves. This is directed by Ted Post. It was written by, I think the teleplay was done by Serling, and then Mike Korgologos did the actual story, and this is starring John Denner, Stanley Adams, and J. Pat O'Malley. So in 1890, traveling salesman Jared Garrity visits the town of Happiness, Arizona, offering to resurrect the dead and reunite the townsfolk with their departed loved ones out of the goodness of his heart for hefty prices. So that person who kind of comes into town here is going to be portrayed by Denner. And then just some other people here that Adams is portraying Jensen. There is Guberman, who's a town drunk, portrayed by O'Malley. Then another important person here I'm going to bring up is Sheriff Gilchrist, portrayed by Norman Levitt. So Happiness is not always the name of this town. It's actually changed a few different times. It's got a very dark past. So this guy rolls in and he goes into the local pub. Now, the sheriff steps in. He's really kind of known for law and order, and that's why everything got cleaned up here. Garrity's trade is to bring back the dead, like the synopsis said. So the sheriff and a couple guys are debating him in the saloon. The one guy who runs with whatever gets kind of said here is Lapham, portrayed by Percy Hilton. So Happiness is the biggest cemetery west of Chicago, and that's why he's here. So going to show what he can do, there's a dog that got hit by a wagon, thought to be dead. So he actually shows what he can do by bringing it back to life. He then tells everybody that he learned what he did in the Himalayas, and the ritual is going to be at midnight. So the whole thing here is that everybody's very nervous because, like, for the sheriff, he's talking about bringing back this person. I think it was Lightning Peterson was his name, who was a convict that was killed, John Cliff. And what's kind of interesting here is not everybody is kind of telling necessarily the truth about their own past and their own history and everything like that. So what the whole idea here is that he will take a hefty fee to ensure that their loved one does not come back or their person doesn't come back. Turns out everything might not be on the up and up, but I love what they do at the ending. I definitely think it's like an EC Comics almost twist to it, but rather enjoyed that. And I gave this one a 7.5 out of 10. And then up next is going to be the Brain Center at Whipple's, which this one actually has a lot of commentary that is spot on even now. This one's also directed by Richard Donner, written by Serling, stars Richard Deacon, Paul Newland, and Ted DeCorsia. So Heartless CEO Wallace V. Whipple automates his family-owned factory and lays off most of the workers over the objections of the foreman Dickerson and chief engineer Hanley. So that Heartless CEO is going to be portrayed by Deacon, and then the chief engineer is Newland, and then the foreman is DeCorsia. So we actually get this a lay of the land here thanks to a stockholder movie update. He's eliminating jobs with tech. So Hanley is the engineer, and he's also seems to be the plant manager. He's not liking putting people out of work and completely automating things. Calls in a guy, he's not happy and gets drunk and comes back, and that's going to be the foreman. And this guy actually attacks a machine. There's fire and sparks everywhere. So Mr. Whipple has him, or shoots him actually with a guard's gun. So then it's kind of interesting here is that we see different things that'll kind of play out. There's a technician that comes in later, Thalmus Rashashulala, and everything like that. And it's just kind of interesting here what they're doing is we're looking at how automating things and making things less human is a very dark way. And it's definitely with all this AI stuff is very interesting kind of concept here that they're looking and exploring. Kind of crazy that this episode is, 60 plus years old and how the relevance that it still has. And then where it kind of goes in the end, you kind of feel where it's going to go. I gave this one a 7 out of 10. We actually have a little fun cameo by Robbie the Robot at the end. And then the last episode I'm going to do here this time around is going to be Come Wander With Me. This one's definitely a surreal fantasy type one, but this one's also directed by Donner. This was written by Anthony Wilson, stars Gary Crosby, and then Bonnie Beecher and Jonathan Bolt. So singer Floyd Burney searches the backwoods for a new song and finds Mary Rachel and much more. So I'll go ahead and say that the singer here is Gary Crosby, who is the son of Bing Crosby. And then Mary, who he meets, is Beecher. And then there's another guy here of Billy Rayford, who is portrayed by Bolt. And then there's an old man that we also get to meet here of Hank Patterson. So Floyd is driving. He's looking for something new. He's this rockabilly kid. He's a musician. And he has these other musicians that he's kind of feuding with as they're all trying to find these folk songs. So he finds a barn full of instruments. He's a jerk, fast-talking old man isn't agreeing with him. There's a grave with his name that we see and he doesn't. And there's this idea about like a wandering man. So he heard a woman humming in the woods and goes to find her. Mary is approached when he strums on his guitar. He sings a song and tells her that he loves her. And then she starts to sing a song and he actually records it. So then there's this weird thing though where Billy shows up. And I think Billy and Mary are together. And it seems like there might be something here with like a time loop and how this has happened before. Mary's trying to get Floyd to do something different so that this loop doesn't keep going the way that it is. But Billy is very hard-headed. And then it sounds like some people end up getting murdered here. And yeah, so that's kind of, I like how we're meshing of like music and how it's disorienting and we're going into the woods here. So it's kind of dark and bleak. Everything kind of goes on there. But this one I didn't like as well. I think it's some interesting concepts. I just wanted a little bit more to kind of tie everything together just a little bit. But my rating here though, rather enjoyed it. 6.5 out of 10. Then I have a book that I'm also going to be giving a review here too of Beyond Zombie Politics, The Art of George A. Romero's Cinema. This was actually, I believe, released officially back in October of 2025, but the editors here are Adrian Botang, David Roche, and Claire Cornelian. So this is a book that I got a chance to check out thanks to Courtney from University Press of Mississippi. Seeing that this was revolving around Romero, one of my favorite directors, made me want to check this out. Now, to frame this a bit more, this isn't a biography. Not necessarily, but it is more of like exploring ideas and concepts that are drawn from the subject concepts and even filmmaking techniques that went into his works. So the synopsis, though, gathers a group of contributors to explore Romero's work beyond the Living Dead films with two parallel but complementary tendencies within 21st century film, the renewed interest in horror aesthetics, and the emphasis on filmmaking as a collaborative practice. So this one features contributions by Julian Ekemkami. If I'm mispronouncing your names, I do apologize. Julie Asuli, David Church, Suzanne Desrocher Romero, Helena Frunzik, Pierre Gelot, Nicholas Labari, Sophie Lecole Sol Nemkini, Janice Lorick, Stella Lewis, Kinsley Marshall, Krista Mitchell, Karen D. Thornton, and Arnaud Vindendal. So this opens up with like an interview with George's wife, Suzanne, who shares her views on the late director's craft and influence. This anthology then divides into 3 sections that deal with the genre, musical motifs, and the recreative process. Each chapter adopts a fresh methodology to focus on an area that received little academic study. I did find this quite interesting, especially hearing different people's ideas. I'll be honest, at this point, I have not seen There's Always Vanilla, Season of the Witch, or Bruiser, but I've seen, I think, all of his other features. So I will say, as someone whose main focus when I'm watching something is story, getting to read other people who know more about different aspects, like when it comes to like music, why it was selected, or what can be taken from is interesting. I'm in love with the soundtracks of Dawn and Day of the Dead, but I'm also like appreciative of things like Creepshow. Hearing more though with like their works and having it broken down was interesting. So there's more here that likes to help break down with like how George preferred to control the filmmaking process from being a director to an editor, learning about his vision and what was going to make sense earlier in his works, and then what kind of works better when you have a bigger crew. It does take a lot of, it takes a lot out of somebody to do all of those different things. Delving and exploring the filmmaking process and what can be done from, taken from it is not only something that was entertaining, but, having something to say. Now, something to warn you about, though, is that this is a series of academic articles. This can be dry when reading, so if you are somebody who needs something a little bit more exciting, this might not be for you. If you're interested in the filmmaking process or Romero, this is an interesting book to help frame and explain his lasting legacy. That was something that kept me reading. I appreciated it for sure. So in conclusion, this successfully moves the conversation past the standard focus of Romero's Living Dead series to analyze the depth and breadth of his filmography. While the academic nature of the collection might not appeal to all readers, those interested in film theory, sound design, the collaborative nature of filmmaking, and Romero's enduring influence as an independent auteur will find this to be a valuable research for understanding the true art behind his cinema and his lasting political and cultural legacy. So my rating here for this one, I rather enjoyed it, and I give this one a 7 out of 10, and yeah, really interesting kind of collaborative effort and collection for sure. And that's all I'm going to have here then for mini reviews. Let me go ahead then and get you over to the trailer of my first featured review.
Is Neville working tonight? He a friend of yours? No.
Please.
Where's her body?
How many times have you killed him?
A lot.
I have been traveling through the multiverse looking for my daughter.
You're not from around here.
No.
Great. Neither am I.
Looking for a world where she wasn't kidnapped and murdered.
You lost your daughter?
It was a long time ago. She's been dead in all of them. So I just keep killing the bastard who did this to her.
What the fuck just happened?
I can't stop. I can't quit. He's taken everything from me. I don't even know what I am anymore.
And for my first featured review here is going to be, I don't know if it's Redo or Redux. But anyways, this is from 2025, getting its wide release here this year in 2026. This was written and directed between Kevin McManus and Matthew McManus, and this stars their sister of Michaela. And then this also stars Stella Marcus and Jeremy Holm. This is also starring Jim Cummings, Taylor Miziak, Deandra Taylor, Bridge Stewart, Derek Alexander, Hilty Bowen, Raphael Chestang, Deborah Christopherson, Manita Gandhi, London Garcia, Clinton Lowell, Michael Manuel, Remy Ortiz, Dan Perrault, and Tamika Simpkins. So this is an action-adventure, crime, drama, fantasy, horror, sci-fi thriller that is from the United States. It is currently sitting on a 6.3 on IMDb and a 3.4 on Letterboxd, with a synopsis being: Irene Kelly travels through parallel universes, repeatedly killing her daughter's murderer. As she becomes consumed by vengeance, her humanity hangs in the balance. So this is a film that caught my attention at the Gateway Film Center. Now, I tried to avoid trailers. I will watch parts to see if it'll draw me in to check out, and then I'll make sure the genres and everything. When I figured out that this was considered horror, it went on my list to see. Now, I couldn't get to the theater to see it, though. Due to the times it was shown, just didn't match up with my schedule. I did, however, get to see this on VOD. So I'm making this a featured review, and it technically also is a Voyage to the Fives watch. So let me do some featured notes then before I jump into my review, and I'll start with our directing team here first with Kevin McManus. He's directed 3 features, and 2 of those are in horror. I did miss their first in genre, The Block Island Sound. It is on my list to see at some point. So then his brother of Matthew, they have the same 3 credits. They've also written the same 3 that they directed. Now, both have also penned a short film as well. Then over to Michaela. She's been in 10 movies and 2 shorts. First of her works that I've seen, she is the sister to the writer-director. I actually figured that I did a Google search to double check that. So she's been in 4 works in genre. Aside from this and Block Island Sound, she was in 13 Cameras and Into the Grizzly Maze, both of which are on my list of things that I need to check out at some point. So then this is Marcus' feature film debut. She was in a short before this. Then last I'm going to look at Holm. He's been in 17 motion pictures and 2 shorts. I've seen him in 3 things. Not horror, he was in The Judge. He was also in Brooklyn 45, which is horror. He has 8 works in the genre. Top 3 that I'm missing are The Block Island Sound, The Ranger, and Blackout. Actually, Blackout I almost went and saw, but that one just didn't work out, and The Ranger's been on my list for some time to see as well. But anyway, let's jump into this here. Like the synopsis states, we're following Irene. She is interesting is that we start with seeing her watching over a man tied to a chair as he's burning to death. He is alive, so, as this happens. We then see her at a diner where she talks to the waitress of Deb, portrayed by Christopherson. Irene's interest, though, lies with a cook of Neville, portrayed by Holm. We then see her struggling while he's choking her, and this is in a bedroom. She is able to get free and then shoots him through the bed. There are variations of how she kills him that we actually get to see multiple ones. So, seeking vengeance for her daughter's murder by Neville, she uses a machine to jump between parallel universes. Her mission is to kill him in each one. She's also trying to find one where her daughter of Anna, portrayed by Grace Van Dien, is still alive. We then see part of her ritual is meeting Jonathan, portrayed by Cummings. They grab a drink, and a woman recognizes her, unsettling Irene, despite the woman's daughter pointing out that it's impossible. Irene leaves with Jonathan, and they hook up in his truck, where she confesses that this isn't their first encounter. This leaves him shocked, especially because of what she tells him. So then, killing Neville isn't always easy. We have some close calls that we get to see. Things then all change when, during one of these, Irene finds a young woman that was kidnapped. The next victim is Mia. That's the one who's kidnapped. She's portrayed by Marcus. And in saving her, Neville comes home and Irene misses her shot to kill him. This is where this has happened before, so she knows where he's going. Mia wants revenge of her own and inquires about what she knows. The young woman is resourceful to the point where she is given money but steals Irene's gun in the process. She has limited bullets, and we see Mia trying to get more. She also hitches a ride with Darla, portrayed by Taylor. Now, Mia won't be stopped, and this includes even when Irene shows back up. Irene's lowliest and avoiding her own fate in the different worlds she's visited, she decides to bring Mia along, but the price of revenge might be too high and their humanity hangs in the balance. So that's something my recap and introduction to the characters. Where I want to start is by saying this is an interesting film. This is in part a character study of our leads, Irene and Mia. We are exploring as well what happens to the human psyche when you seek revenge, as well as questioning your purpose. I'll also kind of say this isn't a traditional horror film. While watching it, I was questioning if it was actually. There are some dark elements, whether this is like Neville and what he does to his victims, or just seeing the darkness of humanity as Irene and in turn Mia lose theirs on this mission. Let's then start looking at Irene, who is immediately established as a depraved character. First, watching a man burn and then shooting Neville repeatedly without remorse. The target's depravity is revealed later, so I think it's kind of interesting to do that. So after showcasing her viciousness, her humanity emerges through her need with connection with like Jonathan and a chance at redemption with Mia because of how her age seems to be very close to her daughter Anna, who is portrayed by Van Dien. We learn that her revenge mission is fueled by her grief over what happened to her daughter, underscoring the theme that it's never too late. It also has her avoiding her fate that was established in the other worlds, and McManus's performance is just excellent. Then to our other character to look at here is Mia. She is a resourceful young woman that we first meet escaping the bathroom in Neville's house, coinciding with Irene's break-in. A product of the system, like the foster care system that is, estimated to be about 15 years old, Mia is determined to stop her captor from harming anyone else. Irene, though, unable to decide for her, seeks to protect Mia's humanity. I mean, she knows what's happened to her, and she doesn't want the same thing to happen to this younger woman. Marcus, in her debut, feature film role, impressively embodies Mia. So the science fiction element revolves around parallel universes, not time travel. As Irene points out, each world is different, and Irene desperately seeks one where Anna has survived. Giving up hope, she continues only to punish Neville across the world, a tragic fate, giving herself purpose. She notes that her universe seems to be unique in having discovering inner world jumping. The approach is grounded, and when Irene's machine breaks, she meets this interesting duo here of Billy, portrayed by Miziak, and Travis, portrayed by Manuel. A key detail is hinted at concerning the power core and why Irene's machine failed. Other themes then to bring up here would be the correlation between the machine and the loop that Irene is in. It resembles a coffin. The fate of the majority of her characters in each of this seems that she's stuck in that moment. It also seemed like Anna's death might be a canon event that no matter what world it needed to happen. We can also see the toxicity of Irene's constant revenge and not wanting that for Mia. We also see the idea of running away from your problems by using this machine to jump between different worlds. So that should be enough of the story. Let's shift over to the acting performances. I've already said how good McManus and Marcus are as our leads. Holm was good as well. What's interesting is that he's our villain who does some heinous acts, but he disappears for stretches. He is this haunting specter. What is great, though, is that this tension ramps up at the end with something that happens when Irene and Mia split. Cummings, Miziak, Taylor, and the rest of the cast kind of push our characters to where they end up as well. Let's then go over to the filmmaking aspects. This is well made. What I like is that we have this lo-fi jump in between sections of the multiverse. This is grounded and believable. With that, I think that the cinematography and framing are great. The limited effects that we get are good as well. What also I think works in its favor is that they seem to be mostly practically done. The blood and the bit of gore that we get looked real. If there is CGI, it was used to enhance, which I appreciate. I'd also say that the sound design and music fit for what was needed. So there's one last thing I want to talk about here, and it's delving into about its standing in horror. I could say that this is more like a crime drama sci-fi film first. The horror comes through the dread of knowing what Neville does. We get glimpses of it at times, and Irene needing to face him constantly. When you add to that with Mia learning her fate and the different versions that come with that, there's some cosmic dread that I think kind of comes from that. We then get to this climax and the actions that led us to the end, and that is terrifying, especially because we actually get to see how kind of vicious and depraved Neville can be. And then one last thing is this, I'll say this one last time, is that this is not traditional horror. If someone doesn't include it, that makes sense. I will, though, as I feel we get just enough. So in conclusion, this is a gripping and unique exploration of grief, vengeance, and the burden of humanity, deftly woven with a sci-fi framework. The McManus brothers deliver a taut, character-driven thriller anchored by a superb performance from Michaela McManus and Marcus. While it defies easy categorization as traditional horror, the film offers a chilling look at the darkness within humanity, making its presence felt through psychological dread and rather than jump scares. It's a compelling, well-made indie feature that uses lo-fi multiverse concept to pose profound questions about obsession, fate, and the cost of escaping a canon event. I highly recommend seeking this one out if you're into these type of things like that. This is kind of an interesting take on the revenge type film where, I mean, usually it's more of like a direct thing, but, you know, kind of getting that revenge there. But for me, I rather enjoyed this one. So Redux, redo, whatever it's called, I'm going to give this one a 9 out of 10. So I'm not going to do a spoiler section. I don't necessarily think there's anything I need to do there, so let me go ahead then and get you over to the trailer of my second featured review. And for my second featured review here is going to be A Page of Madness. This goes by the original title of Kureta Aichapeji. Might be how you say that. Maybe not. We'll see. So this is from 1926. It's directed by Tiensoko Kinugazawa, and they also co-wrote this with Yasunori Katabata, Minori Inzuka, and Banko Sawada. Now this is starring Masuo Inu, Ayako Ijiwa, and Yoshi Nakagawa. And then we also have in this film here, if I gut any of these names, I do apologize, but we have Hiroshi Namoto, Misio Sika, Minori Takasi, Aiko Minami, Kayasoko Takamatsu, Tatsu Tosoiboi, and Sentaro Takaguchi. So this is a psychological drama horror thriller film that is from Japan. It is currently sitting on a 7.3 on IMDb and a 3.8 on Letterboxd, with our synopsis being: a man takes a job at an asylum with hopes of freeing his imprisoned wife. So this is a film that I learned about thanks to the Letterboxd top 250 highest rated horror films list. So I do feel like I also discovered this while compiling my list of films of things to kind of check out when, you know, I was setting up things for these Centennial Club episodes. This is one I was intrigued to watch since it has crossover. Outside of that, and knowing this was from Japan and liking the poster, I did come into this one blind, I will say that. So let's do some featured notes then. Let's start our director here of Gazwa, something like that. Helmed 41 features and one short. First of his works that I've seen, this is his only venture into the genre. Then our original writer here is Kawabata. They did this for 38 features and 4 shorts. This is my first jaunt into their works. This is credited, they have one other one in the genre here of Kaiden Horror Classics from 2010. Then actually writing the screenplay, they did this for 2 movies, only one in genre. Then our director also helped co-write this. He did this for 43 motion pictures. The only time he ever worked in horror again. So what I'm trying to say, this is the only time he ever did horror. Next is going to be Inuzuka. They've done this for 34 works. First that I've watched have 4 total in genre. The other ones are Ghost Story, Depth of Kasani, Crying in the Light Lantern, that's also Ghost Story, and then Ghost Story Passion in Fukugawa. So then last is going to be Sawada. This is their only credit. Now to our cast, first is going to be Inui. He was in 15 films, first and only time he was in horror, only one I've ever seen. This is the only credit here for Ijiwa. And then last is going to be Nakagawa. She's been in 13 features and 2 shorts, only work that she has done in the genre for her career. Okay then, for this movie here. So the synopsis, there was another one that I saw that had a little bit more information. I thought this one was a much shorter one that kind of gave you what you needed to without giving too many details. So we start this film off with a great sequence where it's raining. There are multiple cuts and it's sped up that we're showing different streams of like running water. We also see flashes of other things, and it's meshed with a dancer played by Minamami. Something like that. We then end up where a majority of this takes place. It's going to be a mental hospital. There are these scenes that are edited in, so we're also seeing like layering of the film with a ghosting effect to show that the custodian at this asylum, who is portrayed by Inui, used to be a captain on a ship. What we'll learn through the visuals and the aid of the synopsis is that Nakagawa, who is kept here, is his wife. We see different times where he watches her through her cell door. He also seems to have the key at one point. There are also these men that are kept here who seem to have freedom enough where they can gather around different, like, of the cell doors and everything. They watch her and then as well as watching the dancer. Something I want to include here is that this doesn't have any intertitles. I did a bit of reading up on this, and apparently when this was first shown in the theater over in Japan, they would actually have somebody narrating it. What I gather is that this imprisoned wife tried to drown herself and her child. The daughter is now an adult, portrayed by Injima, and she is getting married. I infer that part of this is happening is that the custodian wanting to get his wife out for that marriage, potentially. He also kind of feels guilty, and I'll kind of get into that here in a little bit, but the doctor who's in charge of her care is portrayed by Sikai, who doesn't want her to leave. So that's really my recap introduction of the characters, where I want to start by saying that I was surprised with how limited of a story this has. It isn't overly important, though. What is impressive is that the visuals and the editing. With how early we are into the history of cinema, that blew me away. We get creative here with the angles and stuff they do with the camera, the intercutting and the ghost effects that are used. That was something that I also thought was very well done. They're limited by the technology, but what they did was enjoyable to watch. So let's stick with this idea here of exploring the themes. Where I want to start is a surreal feeling of the intentional. This is blurring the lines of what's real for the world by showing these internal fantasies of the inmates. The visual distortion that goes with this can bring in the argument that sanity is a matter of perspective. There's also this use of like mask later on in this. What I took from this is that we're hiding your identity with the performance that we put on for when we're in public, hiding who we truly are. Let's look at our lead character here of the custodian. Him giving up his position as a captain and work at this asylum would be definitely a hard thing to kind of do, and it takes a lot of swallowing your pride. So this can be read as a self-imposed sentence by taking what would be considered a menial job. This also could be him trying to atone for his sins of neglecting his wife and their child due to him being away at sea for the times that he is. Then we shift over here a bit to an idea here of entrapment. Whether this is like literal cages within the mental hospital. I noted the spinning wheels. That was something I looked up, and it could be considered that the mother and father are stuck in this loop of memory and suffering. There's another element here that comes into play with the society of Japan. Their daughter, who is set to get married, fears that her mother's illness could ruin her chances of marriage. That trap could lead to societal shame. I then also want to bring up here the chaotic feel of the film. The frantic pacing seems to be mirroring nervous stimulation of the modern city. That was something I looked up for the writers here, and it seems to be there's this movement called Shinkankahua, that way they were obsessed with this. Now, this is also like the loss of tradition. The father gives up the sense of duty for the sterile, scientific environment of the asylum, which is a stark contrast to being on like a ship and everything. So they're mirroring here that Japan is kind of going through at this time. So next is going to be the actor performances. Inoue and Nakagawa as our leads are excellent. Inoue's constant look of forlornness conveys his past struggles and current burden. Nakagawa looks insane with her disheveled look, cycling through trauma when she remembers her past sins. And Jima effectively portrays a young woman seeking a new life while grappling with the sins of her parents. Menami, Sekai, and the rest of the cast kind of afforded the necessary support that you needed there. So then, right before I do some trivia here, the last thing I want to include would be I saw information of this being a silent film. It didn't necessarily have a soundtrack synced with it. Originally, it would have been accompanied by a live orchestra or the like. The film, though, was thought to be lost, and when it was discovered, music was commissioned. The director heard this and made it official with that it would always be kind of included. That isn't something that would be the norm for the films of this era. What they used was unsettling and helped to enhance the atmosphere. So learning that definitely helped me because I could, give credit for it. So kind of what I was talking about there, this was lost for 45 years before it was discovered, hidden in a rice barrel in 1971. This was in a storage shed. However, a third of the movie is still lost as the undiscovered copy had been cut down significantly. So the director here was underfunded, so even his stars, some of them being rather big names, had to assist in painting the sets as well as making the props that were pushing them. Then kind of looking through here, that this was made, most Japanese cinema only showed domestic films while others only showed foreign films. Because of this, it was a quite different standard for the domestic film being made at the time. It was shown in cinemas specializing in foreign films. It was a big hit when the credits who proclaimed it as a masterpiece, but not so much with the audience. The film disappeared and its short preview screening release. So this was shot in 1 month, a considerably long production period for a standard film at the time. Claims there were lack of proper funding for the project because he couldn't afford accommodations for his actors, which led them to sleeping on set or in the front office, so I can see why you'd kind of rush through things there. Our director here only had 8 small lights to work with, so he arranged the walls in a small studio and painted it in a silver color in order to make them reflect additional illumination. So the film has no intertitles, so according to Jacqueline Stewart, this is where I was bringing this up. It was originally shown with live narration. During the silent era, Japanese performers called benshi would be on hand at the screening to fill in gaps in the story, provide background details, and elaborate on the thoughts and the feelings of the characters. That's kind of interesting. According to a mosque in a Variety interview, its silver painted sets, apparently to give more light, also give a strange glow reminiscent to the cabinet of Dr. Caligari. So Kawabata, who would win the Nobel Peace Prize for Literature in 1968, was credited for the film with the original story. He's often cited as a screenwriter, and the version of the scenario is printed in his complete work, but the scenario is now considered a collaboration between him, Kinugawa, Sawada, and Inzuka. And in the top 10 of Cinema Junpo's top Japanese movies of 1926, if you are curious. So in conclusion, this is a landmark piece of silent cinema, not simply for its narrative ambiguity, a result of its lack of intertitles and reliance on benshi narration, but its bold experimental visual language. Our director's direction, coupled with the pioneering editing and camera work, create a dizzying, surreal depiction of madness and societal entrapment that remains startlingly modern for a century later. While the film story serves primarily as a framework, its true power lies in its ability to challenge perceptions of reality and sanity through pure cinematic technique, making it a vital and unforgettable work in the history of global film. So my rating here for A Page of Madness, I actually give this one an 8 out of 10 just because of some of the great things that I kind of picked up on what it was doing. A little bit more story would have definitely helped, but I'm not going to do a spoiler section. I don't necessarily think there's anything I need to do there, so let me go ahead and get you over to one last break before I close out the show.
Pod Nation TV has you beamed up with Out of This World award-winning podcast found exclusively on Pod Nation TV. Download Pod Nation TV for Roku and Fire TV. Pod Nation TV, Out of This World.
Listen, here's the truth. If it's not something you love to do, automation is mandatory. You didn't start your podcast to spend hours editing clips. You started it to create, connect, and grow your audience. But here's the problem. Every other platform works with video podcasts, and manual editing eats up your most valuable asset, your time. That's where Opus Clip changes everything. Upload your video, and Opus Clip will automatically find the gold nugget moments, auto-clip the captions for the best parts, perfect for TikTok, Reels, and Shorts. 1 hour-long episode becomes 10, 20, even 30 viral-ready clips in minutes. The tool even predicts each clip's viral potential, so you know exactly what to post. No more tenuous editing, no more wasted hours, just you staying in the place that you love to be, creating content that matters. Head to podnationopus.com for your free trial and get back to doing what you do best. Stop editing and start creating now.
And welcome back. So if you'd like to send me any sort of feedback, anything you want read on the show, or any screener requests, anything like that, you can send those to journeywithacinephile@gmail.com. If you'd like to read any of my written reviews or see any of the old past podcast episodes, all of that is being stored over at Journey with a Cinephile. That is my blog, and that's going to be horrorreview.webnode.com. If you'd like to follow me and become friends on Facebook, it's going to be David Garrett Jr. is my name over on there. There's going to be a link in the show notes. And then if you'd like to follow me on Twitter, it's going to be Buckeye from Mish. And then if you'd like to follow my Letterboxd page where I have all of my reviews, whether that's going to be horror or non-horror, that's going to be David OSU is my name on that. Instagram and Threads, I'm David OSU87. Over on my personal Instagram page, you might see some of my family stuff every now and then whenever I remember to post something. My wife is much better at it than I am. But then if you'd like to follow the Journey with a Cinephile Instagram, that's going to be Journey with a Cinephile, all one word. And then I'll also direct you, if you'd like, to the Discord channel. That's going to be the Nightclub Discord, but I have a page over there. And there's also some other great pages of other shows and them kind of messing around and everything like that. Do highly recommend if you want to go ahead and check that out. And then the last thing I'll actually say here, if you would like to listen to the show a day early, this is always going to be streaming over there on the PodNation TV app. So I will have, once again, a link in the show notes for that if that is something that you're interested in. So, yeah, there's some great stuff here. There's some great shows on some of these other networks and stuff. I highly recommend checking them out. And for my next episode, we're going to be doing another of these Centennial Club episodes. And the featured reviews, I've actually already watched one of them, but I need to double check that it is available. But my plan right now is from 1926 to watch The Bat, and I'm going to pair it up with Scream 7. Already got to see that opening night at the Gateway Film Center. There were tickets available, and I decided to go ahead and just pull the trigger. Then my Scouring Through the Sixes rewatch is going to be one that I'm not fully sure if I've ever seen it all the way through. I've seen the sequel all the way through, but it's going to be The Food of the Gods. I've been really meaning to rewatch this one for a long time, or at least watch it to completion. I know I have a screener of something called Trucker. That'll be on there as well. And then I've been in the middle of watching Demon Seed. I just keep getting tired and I need to pause it. It's a very interesting movie and, want to do its due diligence and, give it the full experience and everything like that. But I don't think there's anything else I need to say here for this outro except that wraps up this episode of Journey with a Cinephile, a horror movie podcast. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of horror cinema. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow along for more deep dives into the macabre. Until next time, keep watching horror, and remember, fear is just a frame away.
It had been a wonderful evening, and what I needed now to give it the perfect ending